everybody, and welcome to episode 168 of the I Rock Knits podcast. And today we are chatting with friends, and this is my friend Theresa of Get Bentz Farm, and she drove up from Northfield, Minnesota, which is about an hour. Would you say? Well, I know you took a roundabout way, but if you'd have gone direct, it's about an hour. I met Theresa a few years ago when I was teaching down at Northfield Yarn, and she has a farm down that way, just south of the Twin Cities here. For those of you that aren't local, the Twin Cities is kind of located in eastern central Minnesota. So there's a lot of the state north of us and a little bit of the state south of us. But yeah, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for
Glad
having
you're
me.
here. Yeah, she came up. She's going to share with us some of her experiences on the farm, some of her farm yarns. I've been talking about the farm yarn shawl that's coming out, and I did show this. This is the yarn, Theresa's yarn, that I'm almost done. I wanted to have it finished today, but you know what? It'll be finished tomorrow. I just have to add that red section, and so we will have multiple iterations of the farm yarn shawl, which should come out March 10th through the 12th, right in there somewhere. So yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. You're going to be at Crafters Gonna Craft on Sunday as well.
Yep.
This will not come out before that, but we are going to be seeing each other again. We're both teaching.
Yeah.
So yeah, did
That'll
you
be
do
fun.
a lot of teaching?
I used to do a lot more, and I've kind of backed away from it for a little while.
But you teach on the farm.
Yeah, I do. We do a lot of classes on the farm. Our farm we have like a section of the farm that's really focused towards agritourism, to let people come out and experience country life, which is really, really important. Get that fresh air, greenery around you.
So tell us the story of how the farm started, because I know what it was before, but not everyone else will know.
Yeah. So I am not a farmer by trade. I started as a city kid, grew up on the east side of St. Paul, and me and my husband decided around 2011 that we were going to look for land and go off and be homesteaders, because homesteaders was the big thing back then. And so,
well, it's still kind of a revolution. There are still people that are really
into
it.
homesteading.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still big. It isn't smaller. So we started looking for farms, and it took us about 2 years. And in the winter of 2013, we found this farm. And it had this cute old farmhouse, this barn that needed a little bit of work, but we figured we could do it. It had 40 acres that overlooked the Cannon Valley, and it was really underpriced. And so we were like, yeah, let's get this. This seems perfect. And then after we moved in, because it was like a foreclosure during the housing recession and then flipped hands, we learned that it was a meth lab. And that's why it was so cheap. So the garage was where they cooked the meth, not the house, thankfully. So we will eventually have to take the garage down. We've gutted it and taken care of all of the paraphernalia that is left behind from a meth lab. But yeah, the house had a jacuzzi tub in the living room, which, why would you put that there? Yeah, it's been a lot of years fixing up a really cool piece of land.
Yeah. So how many acres do you have?
40.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have sheep and other animals.
Yeah, we over the years, as one does when you buy land, you buy all the animals, and then you realize what kind of animals you want, and you hone that in pretty quickly. So we bought sheep within the first 6 months of moving to the farm. That's how I was like, I want sheep, but I didn't do anything with fiber at the time. I had to learn all of this.
So what was the drive to have sheep? If you weren't a fiber person, I mean, I would think lots of us want sheep, but
yeah,
not if you're not a fiber person, I wouldn't think that.
Well, I wanted them for all the dumb reasons. I wanted them because they have boxes for their
Retinas,
eyes. They're little boxes, and I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
And they're dual purpose.
Yep.
Or triple purpose.
Yep.
My idea was that I was gonna milk them and make amazing artisanal cheeses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I got Icelandic sheep. I got my first 2, and the one that our fiber company is named after Badgerface Fiber. She is number 1 sheep. She was the first one I bought.
And she was named Badger, or their faces look like, I know this story,
Yeah.
but I don't know it.
Yeah.
Apparently. So tell us.
So when I went to pick her up from this lady, and when I went to, me and Jake my husband were joking about this the other night because we were reflecting now that we're deep in this world of agriculture. And so we were reflecting on how silly we were in the very beginning. Because we went and showed up at this lady's farm and we just thought this was the weirdest thing, you know. She came out in a hand knit sweater and she was wearing a dress and mud boots, and it was the spring, and they had solar panels, and, you know, she had dirty children running around. This is all my life now. This is what I do. And we thought, wow, this is weird. She's a weird farmer. But she had the 2 sheep there, and she said, this one has Badgerface. And I thought she meant this one is Badgerface as a name, and it's just a marking on their face.
Okay.
So they look like little badgers.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so you did you name that sheep that then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea that was
okay. That's what I thought. It had something to do with the naming of the sheep. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that was a sought after color pattern until 2 years later when I was buying more sheep. And then I was like, oh, that's not the name? Whoa.
Okay. Interesting. So now you have how many sheep roughly? Because you're in lambing, so.
Yeah, they haven't burst yet, but I'm guessing with the weather changing, we'll have some lambs on the ground, maybe this weekend or early next week. We've grown up and we've shrunk down and we've grown up, and we're in the shrink down phase. So we have right now 27 breeding ewes and 1 ram. And then 1 Weather, Nichols, who was like everybody's pal last year. Yeah. You wrote
about him. So Theresa has an amazing newsletter, and I wrote her last week because she tells just amazing stories. You know how you get a lot of email in your inboxes and you just delete because it's just another... You will stop and read Theresa's. I'm not kidding. I read yours every time because it's well written, thoughtful, and you tell about what's going on the farm, but then you also have a voice of one of the animals on the farm that tells what's happening on the farm, and it's great. Yeah. And I said to her, you need to write a book. You need to be publishing more of your stories and telling things about the farm to other people. And so I just said, we need to have you on the podcast so I can introduce you to these. So go out to Get Bentz Farm. I'll have it down here and in the description down below. And make sure that you subscribe to her newsletter because you will love it. It's just a lovely little read. How often do you put them out? Just occasionally?
Just once a month.
Okay.
Yeah. And I save up all the great stories from that month to put into it.
Yeah.
So we talk about what we're doing as farmers. We talk about the sheep. Well, the sheep get an opportunity to tell you how they're doing and what they think of me. And they often think weird things of me. Yes. And then we talk about what's happening with the wool mill because we have a wool mill on the farm.
Yes.
And the dye garden. And when you can come out to visit the farm. That's kind of...
Yes, for sure. So people will start coming now because of lambing, right? They'll come and they'll... there's so much to talk about because you have your CSA and all these things. But okay, so when did the yarn mill start?
The yarn mill started, so I worked in healthcare. I still work in healthcare.
Yes, right.
So I'm an OT by trade. And when the first inklings of that pandemic that we all lived through, that seemed like a dream these days, when that started to pop up, we could see that this was coming. And so I told my husband, I'm going to quit working full-time and I'm going to work part-time, just anticipating that if this all happened like it did, we would need somebody home to take care of kiddos. And so I went down to part-time and then quickly went down to casual once things really started to get weird. And then that April, which I think nobody knew how big this was until deeper in, but that April we were laid off, all of us in healthcare, except for, and that made a lot of sense because we weren't doing elective surgeries and the kind of work that I do in the hospital is really focused on brain and spine. and you're not doing elective spine surgeries, and hopefully you're not having brain injuries. So they sent us home, and I said to my husband, I go, well, you know what? There's a wool mill for sale up in like a couple, towns north of us. I was like, why don't we just go buy it? I'll see if I could get a agricultural loan, and let's start a wool mill. And that's how that started.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it just was like.
And you
why
just
not?
happened to see the wool mill for sale, or had you had an inkling that maybe you needed to do something with your wool?
Well,
Because that's a whole nother story we want to get into.
Yeah.
About bird wool. Yep.
Yeah. So with Icelandics, it's really hard to find mills that will process it because it's dual coated. It's kind of a wonky fiber. It's not really consistent. And so it was really hard for me to find mills that would turn my stuff into a yarn. And I was selling some of my yarn at farmers markets, but it wasn't a lot. So I started hand processing all of the stuff with this like rinky-dink little drum carder. And lots of people still do that, and kudos to you for doing that. But I knew I needed something bigger if I wanted to make it a business.
Yeah.
And so I said, just trust me, we'll make it a business. And that was in 2019.
Does your mill have a separate name? It doesn't, does it? No.
No, it sits underneath the
Get Bentz.
the farm umbrella, which keeps it all in agriculture and keeps it away from textiles.
Okay, and why Get Bentz?
Our last name is Bentz, and we're in Northfield, which is super cute. And so all our farmer friends have cute names like Whispering Meadows and Hidden Hills and, all of that. And there we are with our crazy Icelandic sheep. And I was like, you know what? We're going to be Get Bentz. We're going to be a little tongue-in-cheek, a little like gritty, because that's who we are. Yeah, we bought a meth lab.
Yeah. Are you known as the people who bought the meth lab?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anytime, well, like a good example of small town living. And we live in Dakota County, which is a bigger county here in Minnesota. And a lot of it is urban. And there's just a small section of the county that's rural. Dakota County Sheriff pulled my son over for driving too fast on the highway. And they pulled him over in our driveway. Because as a parent, you're like, yes, this is great. And we just happened to be outside doing chores when this happened. And he goes, oh, yeah, this was the meth lab. And I'm like, yes.
Yes, it
this
was.
Yes, the meth lab.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay, so you bought this mill and brought it home. This was one of my questions this morning when I was looking at your website and just refreshing myself and your Instagram and did you have mechanical inklings of any kind? Because a lot of what you were doing when I was looking back through your Instagram was showing people how you're in the mill alone and you're making it work. And I'm like, that looks like I don't even like to run my sewing machine because when it jams up, I don't want to deal with it. Right? Like a machine and me are not like, I had back in the day, I had a knitting machine, just a small one. And if something went wrong, I am just not a machine person. But you are dealing with like things and I'm just like, wait a second. Did the people who sold you the mill give you any training on how to put it together and get it? Does your husband have like mechanical?
No. So my husband's in IT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then there's me.
Well, my husband's in IT too, but he loves to restore old cars.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And he got a job running a dairy for a while and he loved the dairy mechanics. It wasn't where the cows came, but it was where they processed and they had conveyors and all that. Mm-hmm. And he just, some of the troubleshooting that had to happen through that, he really enjoyed that, like looking at the machinery of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, no, not you guys.
No, Jake is into like tractor maintenance.
Yeah.
He will help me if something big breaks and I can't get the bolt undone.
Yeah.
But when we bought the mill, we should have done so many things different. And someday I will write about this because we really made not bad mistakes. Nothing got damaged.
No.
Nothing, but it was very dumb.
But learning mistakes.
Yeah. Like really. So we buy the machines and we have our friends come with us to pick up these machines. And these machines weigh like 5,000 pounds.
Yeah.
They're huge. And we loaded them up on our trailers and drove them home with our Fords. And then we used a telescoping forklift to put them into a shed, but these are, like the mill equipment was $75,000. And that was just part of the mill, because then I had to go out and source other pieces.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just picked it up and put it into the spot, and every mill owner that I tell that story to, the dread and horror on their face as I tell them what I've done it tells me I did it wrong. I should have hired movers.
Yeah. So how many parts are there in what you do? Like how many, like I've taken a mill tour out east. But like, what are the kind of the components of what you have at your mill? Like you wash it, you scour it, is that part of what you bought, or is that's separate, right?
Yeah.
You just put it in a machine and it comes out as roving. Is that the part you bought?
Yeah. So the scouring part of wool processing is its own thing. And we all have our own secret ways that we do things. Yeah. And then,
you have to wash it.
But you have to.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have to strip out the lanolin.
Yes.
And I tried to do it in the nicest way so that the yarn can do what I want it to do, because I want my yarn to be very specific. So then once it comes back into the mill, you have to dry it. So I have drying racks, and that was something that I bought, were these drying racks. A picker, that's the first big pieces of machinery. So I bought a picker, which is really just a conveyor belt with a bunch of gnarly razor sharp teeth that pull the wool in to a beater bar, which is a bunch of nails that go around really fast. And when you turn it off, it takes about 2 minutes for that to stop.
Oh, stop. Okay.
So if you get your hand stuck in there, you're screwed.
Oh, yeah.
And then that fluffs it up, and then it goes into the carder.
Okay.
And the carder turns it into that roving. Then from the roving, you have to draft it to thin it out to get it ready for spinning. And there are 2 avenues to yarn processing at this point. So you can go one avenue, which is a pin drafter, which will draft all of the fibers to align in one way. And that is where you get that worsted yarn.
Yeah. Worsted spun.
Yeah, worsted
right?
spun.
Not worsted yarn in the end. Right.
Yeah,
not worsted weight. Yeah.
Not worsted weight.
I do know that.
Spun.
Okay.
Yeah. And so a lot of commercial yarn you get is worsted. It's very slick. It's very smooth. It drapes a lot. And then the other way is kind of what I've done, and there are lots of like semi-worsted, semi-woolen. I think I'm very semi-woolen.
Okay. So the fibers
they're all going this way, because I just run it through a draw frame, which is like a mini carder, and that just kind of thins it out. It doesn't do a lot of rubbing like pencil roving. So I'm not spinning pencil roving. I'm still drafting it in the spinner. And that is where we get that semi-woolen. But my yarns bloom and floof more than you would with a worsted style. Okay,
so after washing, after you've knit with them, they will bloom, or they're bloomy in the skein?
They'll be both.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I found out when I started milling was that I was allergic to a lot of the chemicals that we put on commercial yarns and stuff, and during the process,
as we all should be, actually, but
yeah, right. We should wash
the world is allergic to some of the chemicals.
Yeah
it's
just there. Yeah, it's just part of the deal. And so I was working at a friend's mill, and she would use those chemicals because that is what we all use, are those chemicals. And I would have these rashes up and down my arms. I had some respiratory things. And so when I started processing, I had to not use those, obviously, because I'm not going to give myself rashes. So I developed my own blend of like glycerin and olive oil, and then an emulsifier and water. So it's pretty natural. And yeah, so then that once you're done, once my yarn goes through and it gets put in its skein, then I wash it again.
Okay.
To get whatever's left on it off, and it'll bloom. And then when you knit with it and you wash it and block it, it should bloom yet again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So when you make your swatch and wash your swatch and measure for gauge, as I always talk about, so many people swatch and then they don't wash it.
Oh, you got to wash it.
Right? They don't wash the swatch. And I'm like, are you never going to wash the sweater? And they're like, I swatched, right? And I think that's just a common misconception that you can knit it up on the size needles recommended, see if you match the gauge, and then move on.
Yeah.
I just don't think we're not educating people well enough to know that things can really change in the wash, right?
Oh yeah.
And some people assume that all yarn will get bigger in the wash, and that is also not true.
That's not true.
Right? And so they just say, well, it's going to get a little bigger, so my gauge is okay. Right? And that also, yeah. So let's show some yarn.
Yeah. So
yeah. So you have one kind of sheep, several kinds of sheep.
I kind of have, I started with just the Icelandics, and then over the years I've crossed them. So, and I like to play with that because genetics are really fun. So I played with crossing them with a Jacob ram, and I really liked it because it was the year of all the black wool, and I like my blacks and my browns and grays. And then last year I crossed them with a Jacob ram, or not Jacob ram, but a Cheviot ram, because I wanted to see what that would look like. And so I got a lot of grays.
Oh, okay.
Which again is...
So is it mostly the color that you're getting, or you're also getting a different feel of fiber?
You're getting a different texture. Yeah. And then this year I have a Blueface Leicester ram, Bluey out there, and I think the lambs will have delightful wool. We'll find out in a couple of weeks when they come out. Yeah. And then in the fall when we shear them.
So do you shear once a year or twice?
Twice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fall and spring. Fall and spring?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fall is our clip. That's our harvest. That's our big clip. And that has all of the lamb's wool. And that is the prime Icelandic wool. I don't use my winter Icelandic for anything other than felted products because it's just really coarse. It's no fun to play with. So that it has its purpose, but it's not going to be a garment.
Are some people using adult wool for Icelandic, and that is why some Icelandic wool is not nice? Not nice, but there's a purpose for that, and it's not as, because some people will say, oh, Icelandic, right?
Yeah, and it's scratchy.
Right, yeah, but it doesn't have to be.
No, it really doesn't have to be. During the summer, they get this downy undercoat, and the downy undercoat of the Icelandic has the same micron as the finest merino. So there's your softness, and then the outer coat is this long hair-like coat. And if you spin it just right, what you're doing is you're wrapping that downy undercoat over the long one. So now you've got a really long-lasting, hard-wearing garment that's soft. Yeah. And it's just all about like the processing of it and the types of sheep that you're like, what you're looking for in your flock. So when you buy my Icelandic yarn, you'll know that that's only that fall clip, the good harvest.
So when you process your yarn, then you only get so much. Mm-hmm. And then once that's gone, it's gone. Right? Yeah. So you get 1,000 skeins or 500, whatever the number is, and then people just purchase it, but then you have to wait if you run out until the next time you do another clip, right? It's not just like some places where you can call and they can dye more yarn because they'll just buy more bare yarn. That's not true of a farm yarn.
Right, yeah. And so one thing we decided when we bought the mill and we started making yarn was that there are two avenues for mills to go down. So one avenue is for the mill to go and process other people's fiber. So shepherds will bring them fiber, they will process it, send it back to the shepherd. Shepherd takes it to the fiber festival. And that's great. We need that. And thankfully we have good mills that do that. During during the first Trump administration, there were some tariffs that came about with China, and that caused just a giant dip in the wool industry, in the American wool industry, because China is a big purchaser of wool. And when you have tariffs on that and taxation, they were like, well, I'll go with Australia and New Zealand instead of American wool. I'm gonna get wool from other places. And so we watched our wool cooperatives go out of business. We saw that the price of wool went from like maybe $1.50 a pound for fine wools all the way down to 5 cents. Right now, fine wools, nobody will take it. So it's worth 5 cents. Or maybe the bag that it comes in, which is this big burlap sack, and they're worth $15. Sometimes the wool inside of it is not worth $15. And so shepherds were burning their wool, and they still do. Like, this is happening. It happens in Canada. It happens in the UK.
Because they can't sell it for anything.
There's no money.
It doesn't have any value.
Yeah, because, and a lot of it is that the industry is looking for one thing. You know, like, think about ready-made garments that are coming out that are wool. That is one type of wool. That is just merino. Merinos don't do well here in Minnesota. Yeah. It is not a desert climate, if you haven't noticed.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
We do better with other type of sheep, but because it doesn't have that M stamp on it, people, consumers don't understand.
Right.
And so, like, that's where the farm, we're trying to give people something for their wool. We're trying to make elevate it.
I know that you were talking to Matt, and Matt got some burn pile yarn from you to knit a sweater. And so you wanted to help farmers get rid of their burn pile yarn. Is that what kind of what happened? You were like seeing farmers that had these piles, and you were like, let's see if I can't do something with it.
Yeah. And because as a spinner, you know that different types of wool give you different types of garments. And I could talk for days about that, because there's so many differences in each breed and what they end up as. So what I wanted to do was to give consumers an opportunity to see what it's like, whether it's burn pile wool, which are usually your down breeds.
Nice wool.
I know, it's
it's sad.
It's super sad, but like, you've got your Hampshires, Shropshires, Dorsets, Suffolk. Those are your down breeds, and that wool is just labeled as nothing. Low quality, greasy. That's usually what it's called. Low quality, greasy. And so that's what carpets are made out of sometimes, or they used to be, and now that industry is kind of gone. So I like to take that wool and turn it into cool yarns and show people how neat it is.
Yeah.
And then take more stuff and make more cool yarns. So whatever I make, it might only be the time I make it. I might not ever make it again.
Yeah.
Because I might not get that type of wool. I might not spin it to that gauge again.
Yeah. Matt was super excited. I've had Matt on the podcast a number of times because he comes and shows us all the men's sweaters that he knits, all of the fully cabled sweaters and stuff. And so people will recognize who I mean. But yeah, he was really excited. He was talking about the burn pile wool that he had gotten, that you had turned into some beautiful, was it cream?
It's creamy.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's look at some yarns you brought.
Yeah. So when we harvest our stuff in the fall, it takes me a while to get it into the mill because I got stuff already
in front of it.
Right. Yeah. So I just got my Icelandic out. And so I'm knitting with my Icelandic. And I'm knitting one of the patterns from Arctic Knits. She's up north in Canada in the Arctic.
Is this the gal that was the petite knitter?
Yep.
And she just rebranded
to Sasky and Company?
Yeah. Different name, because there were two kind of petite knit people out in the world, and people were confusing them all the time. So it isn't Petite Knits, it was the Petite Knitter, and now she's okay.
Yeah,
this is lovely, and she's got a huge following.
Yeah. I love the pictures. She kind of speaks to me with, you could see lots of browns, lots of grays, lots of tans.
Yeah.
Kind of my color palette.
Yep.
Very muted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And her patterns lend themselves really well to farm yarns and yarns with textures. So I'm knitting.
But she's also living in a climate that where she wants just that farm yarn type of insulation too, right? Yeah, for sure. So which one are you knitting?
I am knitting the glacial jumper.
Okay.
And it's on needles, so you can't
really
see,
but
yeah. No. So that's my Icelandic. I'm doing I'm very petite too, so I always have to shrinky dink down my stuff. But you can kind of see here what I'm...
Are you smaller than the smallest sizes usually?
Yeah.
So you have to... We're not size inclusive?
No, I have to cut down. I'm like child size.
Okay.
So I have to cut down my patterns by 10 to 15 stitches.
Okay. So that's the...
Yeah, that's the sweater. That'll be it.
Oh, look at how pretty.
And it's got fuzz too.
So are you using, is it a 2-color pattern?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep. 2 colors. I'm using kind of a brownish gray and then a dark cocoa
these
brown.
look different on the camera a little. This looks really gray. It's not, it's got more brown in it, but it's probably because we're holding it in front of
more
her.
brown.
Yeah, but more brown, right? Brown. But you know, it's definitely a brown gray. It's not, and it's not quite as light as what that's on the camera either, but a nice contrast.
Yeah, it's a subtle, nice
kind of tone on tone, which I think is another, I always tell my viewers what I think is the new trend, right? And I think Surrey is gonna overtake mohair. People are gonna be like, they're gonna all flip to from and then I think this new tone on tone where sweaters are just done in palettes that are really similar. I'm seeing a few of that start to come through now, where people are just like doing not these bold pops of color in yolks that people don't want to wear, that are just like screaming yolks, right? Because that's not, we don't what. Yeah. Right. Like where I just don't have gray and beige and tan in my palette. You are like, you would not probably, well, not that you wouldn't, and I wouldn't either, but you wouldn't put orange and yellow in a yoke of a sweater. And, we were talking about this at sweater camp, right? Yeah. About how our eyes, like sheep eyes, are all different, and that my eyes have fewer rods and cones, I think is what someone told me, than a person who is not a bright. Like, so people who pick brights have fewer rods and cones in their eyes, so they see color differently than someone who has more rods and cones. So for you, and I, it's hard to say, but you would see this as not as you just wouldn't be as drawn to it. Yeah. And I'm not as drawn to that, but it is a preference. Like, people always say, what's your favorite color, blue or whatever, but it's also the way we visualize our world, I think. Yeah. And why we're drawn. I would like to do more research on that. I don't know anything about the eye and vision and how we see color. I know my husband doesn't see some colors, because some days,
right,
he'll
when you're
say
like,
to me,
that is clearly blue. Yeah.
And he'll be like, I don't like green. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, that is not green. That is not green, right?
Right.
Yeah. Whew, so I'm like, what are you seeing, right? And I do think that if you couldn't explain to someone what you see as compared to someone else. I did see a thing the other day, though, because you guys have a dog.
Yes, a couple of them.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've only seen the one that's scared by the
hamster. Yeah. If you subscribe to my Instagram and you watch the stories from time to time, you will see our corgi get scared out of his mind by a hamster in a ball. Which is just hilarious, because he's quite a vicious little killer when he's not in the house. He usually takes care of the coons, any kind of moles, voles.
Oh, the corgi does.
Yeah, the corgi.
And they're bred to do that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 blue healers.
Oh, okay. I think I've seen a picture of one of them.
Yeah, Pepper is the one that is glued to me. I'm her emotional support human, so she's always glued to me when I'm in the mill.
So, yeah, but I saw something the other day on Instagram about how dogs see the world, and they were going down a path, and they were some person was showing what the colors were, and everything just kind of had a filter over it of softness. And I thought, I wonder if that's how, some people see. They just had this thing, and they just don't see all of the vivid colors. There were some colors there, and I thought, gosh, that's just fascinating to me how, what you see here might be different than what I see here. And we would still call it blue and pink, but,
I like this pink because it's very muted.
Yeah.
And the blue greens, I like tweeds.
Yes.
Yeah. So my eye's drawn to that right away.
Do you ever barber pole?
I do. I do.
Yeah, okay. I thought I'd seen something that you'd done that had barber poled.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's see some more.
Okay.
Because I keep interrupting with all my talk about color and... eyes
and
and
stuff. So the other, if you're like, what do I don't knit sweaters, let's say, quote unquote, I don't knit sweaters, but I want something, and I like Icelandic. So this is a lovely little pattern. It's called the True North pattern that my friend Alla made for me. It's got a fun little Latvian braid. Yeah. And it's all my Icelandic. It looks like it's 3 colors, but it's just 2 on each line. So you're never carrying too many. This is what Icelandic really, this is where it shines. It shines in these really hardy, durable outerwear things. So like last week when it was minus 20, remember?
Yes, not that long ago.
Right, last week. I could wear these out doing my chores and the wind doesn't cut through it because of how dense it is. And then the downy undercoat, you can see it's kind of pilling a little on the outside. That pills on the inside. So it's almost like you have thrums on the inside.
Yeah, felting, yep.
Yeah, so you have all this nice soft felting. So that's a fun...
I have a dog park hat that kind of did that on the inside. And I wear it every time I go when it's cold outside.
Yeah.
So can your yarns be used for warm weather garments?
I think so.
Because they're wool breathable?
Wool is breathable. It wicks away moisture. It retains your body temperature and helps regulate it. So what I do, my method of making Icelandic go into the summer, this is the summer in Icelandic, spring and summer, is that I add a little bit of merino and a little bit of alpaca.
Okay.
And that blend of merino, alpaca, and Icelandic gives it more air and softness, and then it allows you to wear it into the spring.
Okay.
If I think it would be a little hot in the summer,
right.
But who would be wearing heavy wool? That's when you wear your linens and your...
No, for sure. But for people who live in warm climates, I didn't want to, everyone who lives in a warm climate probably has cooler temperatures where they think it's cool. Like we go to Arizona in January for the car show and they're bundled up down there, right? They think it's cold and I'm like, this is not cold. But there would be people in some climates who would say, well, I could never knit with that because it doesn't, but they do have cold temperatures where they feel like it's cold. So I just wanted to be inclusive because like literally I have a lady who lives in the Mediterranean who watches, right? Like,
well, those
and so
coastal climates, you get a lot of moisture.
Yes.
The humidity is really high. And when that humidity gets to a certain point, you will feel cold because of the humidity. Not here in Minnesota in the hot summer, but like we spend a lot of time in Savannah in Georgia. And when we go to Savannah, I'm always wearing wool sweaters because it's moist. It's so cool and coastal. And and that it sinks into your bones, the kind of cold that sinks deep in. Yeah. That's what wool is for.
Yeah. Cause I have a lady who contacts too, and she lives in New Zealand, and I ask, what part of New Zealand and what's your temperature like? And so and of course they have tons of sheep, but I just thought we should mention that it's not just exclusively an outdoor winter climate wool. Yeah. Right.
No, not at all.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. So then what else I do?
Oh yeah. Let's show your label too, because that would say Badgerface on it. Bentz Farm.
Yeah. And you'll see I have so in Minnesota we do, I'm sure every state does something similar. So we do this Minnesota grown bit.
Yep.
So that means that 90% of every skein comes from Minnesota. I have to have 90% of the skein in there or Minnesota wool in there to make this a Minnesota grown product.
Awesome.
Which is super cool. So it's super hyper local. And then you'll also see this fun, my husband designed it. It's kind of janky. I like it. Solar powered bit. And that is because our mill is solar powered now.
That's just awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So this is a type of...
When did that happen?
We got a grant. So this is the beauty of sweater camp. I think sweater camp is really... It's like this great thing. And I'm totally on board with sweater camp.
Which is the Stillwater retreat that I went to in January and sat at Theresa's table for a couple of days, and we all go to eat, and Sam of Lavender Loon was at our table, and she's been on the podcast, and but it's sponsored by Darn It Anyway in Stillwater, and they have the sweater camp in January, end of January every year. About 220 to 230 knitters show up. They have day passes, they have Zoom passes. So if you're new, to watching this, I've talked about it before, but you may not know. So that's what she means by sweater camp. And you don't have to be knitting on a sweater or wearing a sweater to go. That's just what they named it. They just call it sweater camp. And then they have speakers that come in from all over the world on big screen TVs. And then they have a couple of in-person speakers. So Theresa and Sam both spoke, you know, at sweater camp and talked about their sheep and their sheep and their farms.
Yeah.
I put those two together. But yeah, so
last year, not last year, but the year before, I spoke at sweater camp. And that was my first time being exposed to this other part of the knitting community. And I think it was the first time a lot of knitters had been exposed to a farm style yarn. And they just loved the yarn.
Yes.
And we sold a bunch.
Yes.
And because of that, I could then invest that money into solar. So that's another important thing when you look at where you're going to spend your money on your yarn. Every time you spend money directly to a farm or something, as farmers, it goes right back into that agricultural place. So it could be improvements in the land, it could be biodiversity of the species on, you know, on our hillsides and stuff.
And this is her Icelandic yarn is what I used for this, but we want to be clear that Theresa doesn't dye yarn. Well, that
I don't know.
But you have a dye garden, so that could be confusing.
Yes.
But she had this dyed by Sarah of Muse 2320 in Hastings, which is near you.
Yeah.
And so I, of course, picked up the bright colored yarns, and she's going to have more dyed up. Yeah. So this is all Theresa's yarn, even though she's showing us the browns and gray, because that's the closest to the sheep, right?
Yeah.
But then she got some dyed, and I just happened to have this, and I wanted to knit up something with it. I bought one skein of the white, and I knit the hat that you had the pattern for a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I think what we do at sweater camp is we listen to the story of what the person has to tell, and then we go buy all the yarn, right? Because you feel so close to the source. Like, even if someone isn't farming their yarn, you listen, and then you're like, I want to support that person. And so I think that's it. It's a full circle of,
it is.
You know, I already had this, and I was like, I'm going to do another palette of this yarn, and it is lovely. And there is definitely a bloom on this.
Look at that halo.
Yeah, it is definitely has.
That's fun. That's some fun fuzz. So since I don't dye, and not everybody wants grays and browns, and more browns and more grays. Although they should, because it is pretty delightful.
Because then you're just wearing the sheet.
Right. What I do is I will go and find things that are waste materials. Like, so Faribault Woolen Mill, they'll bring in stuff to make their blankets, right? Mm-hmm. And they can't use all of it.
And I have talked about that because we went down to the sale last year, and I bought blankets, and actually there's one right there on that orange chair. Yeah. And I brought them out and showed them, and I bought several different ones. So I had a video, a little bit of what we were doing at the sale, so they'll know. That's south of you.
Yep, just south of me, next town down. So they have waste from their mill, which they can't use anymore, but I can add it to stuff to get color. So if you see color, it's usually from a recycled material, somebody else's waste. I do a lot with sari silk, so that's what's in this skein. And you can see little pops of color. So this is just recycled sari silk from the sari factory that I have popped into this lovely gray base. And it's hard to get it on camera, but it's colorful. It's there. Yeah. It's pretty. And that way you get these like cool little pops of color.
And you lay that on the fiber. I've seen it on your video where you just lay pieces on there, and then when it goes through, it comes out as it comes out.
Yeah. It's all random.
Yeah. It's really cool.
No rhyme or reason to it. But yeah, and then on the farm I have a friend who is a natural dye gardener.
Yes.
So if you're into natural dyes and you buy your natural dye stuff from Botanical Colors, most likely it came from this farm.
Yep.
Because Maddie is one of the only people who grow these plants in the country at this quantity. So if you come out to the farm, get on the newsletter, you'll see the farm dates as we enter into spring. Come out and you can see the dye garden, all the plants that you need to get the medieval rainbow. That's what we say, the medieval rainbow. We don't do a lot with indigo. We do more with woad because we're a cold climate state, and that does better here. But yeah, you can walk through the garden.
And aren't you also doing something with some of the college students?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So Northfield is where Carleton College is, and they have a really big antiquities department. So we partner with that antiquities department, the languages and archaeology and antiquities and anthropology. We partner with them to help them understand how people did it. Like if you think about archaeology, how the Druids processed woad to make themselves blue. Because woad is not like indigo where you just dip your hand in and then it's blue. Yeah. Woad is completely different. And so we've had interns come out and study that. We do once a year, we do a big celebration for Persephone, as Persephone goes back to comes from the underworld and comes back, and there's the Greek thing, and that's like a lamb celebration. It's really fun. Yeah.
Theresa's doing the hustle, right? I always talk about I'm doing the hustle, right? I'm reaching out to people. I'm over here talking to these people about this venture and that's what you're doing too, right? Like you're applying for grants, you're trying to be sustainable, you're putting in solar, but then you're also working with students and you're bringing people to the farm. Like there's just this constant churning of education, which is really what it is, letting people really know more about what the farm is. So if you have a junior or senior in high school who is looking for a great college, because Carleton is a really good school. Kylie looked at Carleton. She ended up at Grinnell.
Oh yeah, that's another really great school.
But it's similar, like the nerdy brains, right? And they go to a small liberal arts school, and Carleton is, so you could take your child to visit the school and then also go to see.
Yeah, come see the mill. Come see the mill. Yeah, and the farm.
Are there other mills near you?
Yes. Yeah, there is one of the oldest mills that does kind of the cottage industry stuff, which is what we all classify ourselves as, cottage industry mills. Eichelberger.
Okay, yeah.
She's right over there. She really raises alpaca on her farm. Makes lovely yarn.
Yeah. There's one near my hometown in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's in Brandon, and there's a mill over there that because I go home to South Dakota, which is where my brothers and parents live. I'm going to reach out to them and see if I can go visit and have them on the podcast too, which is far from you. I mean, it's probably 4 hours or whatever, but I mean, they're pretty spread out. I think my point is they're not dotting everywhere. No. And mills are going out of business. And they're not it's because of the wool prices kind of, right, going down.
I think it's more, so it's really hard work, and you have to invest a lot of money into making the business work. It just in your machines. I think every year we have to do our taxes, and since we're a farm, we slowly depreciate our equipment. And so we looked at what the value is, and in that pole building, it's like $250,000 worth of machines that I've paid for on the back of my yarn and my sheep. And it's hard for, if a person wants to do this work and mill for other people, they have to understand it's incredibly physical. It's really expensive to get started into, and you have to hustle. You really have to hustle because you're always dependent on that paycheck to pay your bills. Yeah. So, the route I went where I'm making my own yarn has been really successful for me because of the business model. And because I've branched out into agritourism and I'm doing other things.
Right. Doing the hustle, right?
Doing the hustle.
Doing all the things to pull it all together into one, business.
Yeah. And not everybody who wants to make yarn wants to do all the other stuff. And so we've seen younger mills shut down because they can't do this and make it sustainable. And then we've seen older mills where people are retiring. So we have that first big wave of retirees, which is like, oh no, that's all that information is lost. Because the other thing with mills is that they do not come with any instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like these machines are not, other than the Belfast
and
company,
they're old.
Some of them, yeah. So Belfast in Canada, they're making mills right now.
Okay.
They're making mini mills. And you can look them up. And then the majority of the equipment I have in my mill are from an American manufacturer.
Okay.
And they've stopped making mills like a decade ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't get parts.
No, but the cool thing is that most of the guy who made the mill I have, he would go to Menards to make it.
Oh, okay.
You know, so I can go to Menards and
Okay.
yeah.
So I taught up at the Nome Schoolhouse in Nome, North Dakota in November, and I'm going back in April, and they have a mill in the basement, and she has 250 head of sheep or something.
Yeah.
She's got a huge, and then they have that felting business where they make a lot of felting, needle felting kits.
Yes.
They put together these kits in box, and then but they also had a felted saddle pad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where they had machines made at the university, and they make these felted pads for everything, right? And they had these round discs just laying there, and they looked like coasters, right? They looked like coasters, and they were selling them, but they also gave us each one, and they said, "Oh, this is for your cup holder in your car."
Oh yeah,
and
to
I
soak
was
up
like,
the icky bit.
Yeah, for your water that is sweating or whatever. And I thought, brilliant, right? Like in your head, you're thinking, well, I don't have a horse anymore. I can't buy a saddle pad. What felted product could I don't needle felt.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, well, yeah, that is brilliant. So I have a few, every car has the cup holder, little felt thing in there, which makes you feel like, okay, I'm a part of, the industry where they're just using, I think they're using scrap wool, like for those
pile.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. The down breeds are really resistant to wet felting. So like we make sponges for your kitchen out of down breed wool.
But you also have meat,
mm-hmm.
and you also have fleeces.
Oh yeah,
and pillows,
right?
Yeah. Like you have other.
Yeah,
like she's doing the hustle. Like I don't want to forget anything, but
we do it all.
Okay, yeah. So
we bring in kind of in like a quick synopsis of what we have. So we bring in all this wool from all these other shepherds, and then we have our own stuff, but we bring in a lot of stuff. So we skirt that stuff, and not everything that we skirt can be yarn because there's poop in every fleece.
Yep.
So the poopy bits get sent off to my friend's company who makes pellets, and they make me pellets for the garden. So if you are in desert climates, if you garden, if you have houseplants, wool pellets release 10% nitrogen. So that means you do not need to fertilize your soil after you add the pellets. So just fantastic. And they retain moisture. And
so when you're potting, you mix it in with your soil,
mm-hmm.
right then, right? I've seen the pellets. I'm not much of a gardener, but I have quite a few houseplants. So, but I didn't think of it for houseplants. I was just thinking it for a garden. So
no, houseplants. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mix it in then. You don't just sprinkle it on top.
You can, yeah.
Oh, so you could just water it and it would
mm-hmm.
got it.
Yeah, okay. Because as it breaks down, it's releasing that nitrogen.
Go online. No, just Sunday.
See me on Sunday. I'll have some. I will have some for you. And they're all in biodegradable bags with biodegradable stickers because, we gotta keep it full circle. And then we always have wool that has break in it because not every animal's fleece is going to be great for yarn.
Kind of like our hair. Some people have good hair, some people don't, right? Yeah. They have breakage or whatever. So.
Right. And if you get sick, that shows up in your hair. Same with sheep. So that wool gets sent to St. Peter Woolen Mill, another very cool local mill.
Oh, yeah. I've been there.
Pat. Pat's fantastic. Family owned up until just not too long ago. They ended up selling to a company in California, but it's still run by the original family. They take it and turn it into pillows and comforters, and then that's a lifetime purchase. So that's it's like changing the way that we think. So when you buy a wool comforter, that is it. You do not buy another comforter for the rest of your life. And then you can pass it down to the next generation, which is really cool because we're not wasting anything. Same with the pillows. And if they need to be cleaned or recarded, you just send them back to St. Peter. They take the cover off, they card it, they put the cover back on, or you can have a new cover, and then you have another lifetime in this item. So they're investment pieces, but they're lifetime pieces. So that's another whole line of stuff that we do to minimize our waste.
Yeah.
What else do we have? We do the sponges. We are piloting landscape fabric.
Oh,
made
out of wool.
Yeah, yeah, because it takes.
Isn't this cool, you guys? I'm like, when she sat down, I said, I'm a little ignorant. I'm a little sheep ignorant, right? Like I know breed names and things like that, but I haven't really incorporated a lot of it into my life. And I, my husband and I don't have a lot of waste. We do a lot of recycling. We're talking about composting. We try to use up things, but the wool part is just a new piece for me. And I just thought it would be, educational for all of us. I think there are many people out there who know more, but I'm just fascinated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a rabbit hole that I could get into and talk about for days. But.
So, other animals on the farm.
We raise turkeys, and that's kind of just for us, and we sell to our friends Thanksgiving turkeys. Yes. A fresh Thanksgiving farm turkey is pretty nice. Yeah. And so when you come to visit the farm, you will see turkeys, and they will come up to you because that's what turkeys do. Yeah. They're very curious. And then we have laying hens, and that should be it this year. We don't do pigs anymore. We don't do cows. We don't do goats. We had cashmeres that we were watching for a friend, but they took them home, thankfully. Okay. Cashmere goats are something else.
Okay. Because I do think a lot of people think goats are so cute. All goats, like the little springy goats and the, when they're babies, like Sam.
Yeah, Sam got a couple goats for 4-H.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all think they're very cute, but not so much. They're pesky little.
They're different. Goats are different than sheep. Sheep are different than goats. And I feel like you kind of go into your lane, what you like.
Like, yeah. You know what you like. And
yeah.
So do you sell eggs?
No.
Okay.
No, we barter them.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have like this weird intricate bartering system down in Northfield.
Yeah.
So we get all of our vegetables from a friend and we give them eggs. And then we tap our trees. So all of our maple trees are tapped right now.
We were just talking about that knitting on Thursday. Someone has a lake place up north, and then someone in Chanhassen, right on 5, they tap their whole neighborhood. A guy in the neighborhood taps all their trees. Yeah. And they collect it all, and they all get some maple syrup from it. And they were just talking about this warmth and temperature and how it got so warm so quickly, and that, they didn't know if it would run if it's not cold at night, right? They want cold at night.
Yeah, you got to have cold at night.
Yeah. Yeah. To have good maple syrup. Anyway, they were talking about it. I know a little, but. Yeah, it's
a thing. It's definitely
Did you have a lot of maple trees?
I think we probably have 50 or 60.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, a lot.
And they just sit on the hillside, which is really fun when you live on steep hillsides, to collect maple syrup and bring it up to the top of the hillside. It's really fun. But we tap those, and then we work with the Indigenous Food Lab, and they come out and tap, and then they
process it.
They process their own. So we give them the space to tap, and we give them a lot of the sap that we collect so that they can process it and give it to the elders in the community.
Oh, okay. But you get some.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm a food hoarder and a canner, and yes. So if you go in my basement, you'll be horrified by how many jars of things I have.
Do you can the vegetables then that you get from the other farmers? Mm-hmm. So you don't have like a garden, your own vegetable garden. Yeah, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, I don't have time for that. Yeah. And then I glean from their farm. So at the end of the year, when they've harvested everything that they want, they'll say, Theresa, I still have blueberries on the plants, or I still have tomatoes on the vine. Do you want them? And we'll come and we'll glean all those tomatoes for spaghetti sauce and salsa.
Yeah. Okay. What do you feed your sheep?
Well, we give them hay.
Because I was thinking like the vegetable thing, right? Aren't there some that eat all the stuff?
Yeah.
Do all sheep eat all food?
Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah, but
right, like
the primitive sheep, the Icelandics, and other like older breeds tend to have bigger rumens, so they can digest this stuff easier and they don't bloat.
Okay.
More commercial breeds would have a little hard time with the amount of vegetables we give them. So our sheep, with the friends that we have that give us the vegetables for the eggs, the other deal that we have is that once a week we'll go to their farm and pick up all of the vegetables that can't sell them to humans, right? They've got nibbles from mice or whatever, disease, whatever. Nothing that will hurt the sheep, but people can't eat them. And we'll load them up in our truck and we'll feed them to the sheep. So again, if you look at our Instagram, you'll see video after video of sheep chomping on carrots, because that's their industry. They're a CSA farm, but they also make a lot of money selling carrots in the wintertime to co-ops.
Okay.
So we get a lot. Right now it's the carrot season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love carrots.
I do too. They're so good.
Oh, roasted carrots that could just... Okay, great segue though. CSA. That's another thing you do. We haven't hit on. So yeah, tell us about your CSA, because that is for sale on your website. Customer supported agriculture.
Community supported agriculture.
Okay,
is what CSA stands for. So what you do is it's very similar to a yarn share or a fiber share in this industry, but because we're agriculture, we call it what agriculture calls it, which is community supported ag. You buy a share, whether it's a half skein or full skein. Half skeins or half shares are 150 yards, which is decent. You can get things done with that. Or if you really like to knit, you can go with the 300 yard skein, and that's the full share. Same with roving. You could do 3 ounces versus 6 ounces. You will get a new skein or a new bundle of roving every month during the 6 months of that agricultural season. So the summer share or the winter share. And you get a newsletter, a special newsletter just for shareholders, where it tells you where I sourced the fiber, silly stories behind the people and where I got it from, why I made it, why the blend, why the weight of the yarn. And what it does is it supports me as a miller to develop new techniques and to play with new things. It takes away a lot of that risk that I would have as a business, and it allows me to make things that I never thought would work, but work. Like, so I brought this. Yep. This is what I would never think would work. This is a yarn that I made for my CSA, and of course it's beige. Everything is like a sad beige in my life. You're better at doing the video. So feel that like bounciness, right?
Oh, and it's really soft.
It's really soft.
Is there some alpaca in it?
It's 90% alpaca.
Okay.
Yeah. 90% alpaca, but this is lace work. And I wear this shawl every day. I think it's a month and a half old, and you still get the points.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because I added 10% Rambouillet. But, you think about alpaca and you say, this is going to grow. Yeah. This won't hold its shape. This won't have this kind of like stretchy bounciness to it. But a little bit of softness, a little bit of that wool has made this into what I think is kind of the perfect yarn.
Yeah.
But that's where the CSA...
Yeah, this weighs nothing, but it'd be nice and cozy.
Yeah, cozy, but not too warm, not too heavy, when you're small.
And what pattern is this? Do you know?
This one my friend made. Her name is Diane Pearsall. I can't remember what she called it. Cat paw?
Cat paw, you think? I'll look it up and I'll put it on the screen when I edit.
Yeah.
No, it's really soft.
Isn't it?
And really, yeah.
And it's got...
And you just had it wrapped around your neck several times when you came, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes I tuck it in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you would think you've been in the industry. You know what 100% alpaca or really high alpaca percentage yarns, would you expect it to behave like that?
No.
I know, right?
So that was one of your CSA skeins.
Yeah, it was one of the CSA skeins, and that CSA allowed me to develop this. And then from that I can
because you
replicate
knew
it.
you had a chunk of money coming in because people had pre-bought, and so then you could know that you were paid for the time and energy it would take.
Yeah.
And the yarn that you were going to make, right? Yeah, it's kind of like my Patreon.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It's very similar to that.
Right? Like I started last April Patreon because I wasn't able to pay my monthly bills some months. Other months it was no problem. And I was like either going to have to quit podcasting or quit designing or quit. One of them needed to go because it just wasn't working. And these people are giving me $2 or $4 a month and just
it adds up.
Oh, for sure. And I have a monthly bill of things that I have, my website, my my Canva, my Zoom, all those things that I have to pay for every month, and they're just helping me pay for that, and it feels so supportive, right? Like it's so just heartfelt, right? When you get that payment, I get it on the 5th. It's coming up here, and it's just like these people all stuck with me to help me support so that I know that monthly those bills are covered, and in other months where I make more, I can invest more in taking design time, right?
Yeah.
And taking my time with it because I'm going to have a new design that comes out, but it's going to take me 2 months instead of 3 weeks, which means I'm not selling another pattern in that month, right? Like,
yeah. Oh,
yeah, so
it's just, it like takes the weight of the world off of you. And I know every month I get to just focus on creating. I don't have to worry about the next market, the next thing,
right.
You know?
Exactly.
And
no,
that's,
I know.
Right? Because we're always like, what's coming next? What's coming next?
Yeah.
And then the cool thing is that the CSA shareholders get the yarn first, and they get to tell me about it, what they liked about it, if they've gotten to it, you know.
Yeah.
And then as a maker, it says, okay, Theresa, you were right. This worked. Or that didn't work quite as well as I wanted it to. How can I tweak it? So this yarn, I call it Winter Softness. It's up on the website. If you like knitting with soft things that keep their shape, it's there, and it's delightful. But this was one of the CSA yarns. And then the sweater I'm wearing right now was another, just like
untoucher.
Yeah. It was like
lovely.
Isn't that lovely? This was like I made a DK versus a worsted weight of it. So that's it. It's brown again. Everything's kind of brown right now.
Yeah.
I'm in the browns of my life. But this is what I call wham. It's wool, alpaca, and mohair. And the mohair is such a small percentage, and it gives you this slicky, like halo-y kind of like, that's kind of hard to see, but it gives you kind of a halo, and it adds more strength to it.
And you're wearing that next to skin?
Do you
have a t-shirt on?
My dress goes to like
here.
But I usually wear it next to skin because it's soft, you know. And the wool inside of this is Clun Forest, which is, I know.
Where did you get Clun Forest?
My friend Beth raises them.
Oh my gosh.
And Beth is 80 years old. She's just this badass shepherd, like raising these sheep out on the hillsides of Welch.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know. So I grabbed her stuff. I made this yarn. I sent it out to my CSA members, and they were like, "Oh, this is awesome!" So I knew I had it right. But yeah, that's the CSA.
Yeah, Clun Forest. That's another breed of sheep, which I was familiar with. Good for me. There are a few I probably don't know, but yeah, that's amazing because that's just not something. I mean, Rambouillet. I think now we're hearing a lot of the Shanico. We're hearing that. The merino, but then
there's Targi.
Yeah, Targi. We hear Targi. I'm hearing about more Targi. So yeah, there's some stuff you can be looking for when you go shopping a bit that is really closer to the sheep, I feel like.
So the history of merino sheep is so interesting. So it was developed in Spain.
Okay.
It's a Spanish sheep.
Let me do a lesson.
Yeah, desert sheep, right? And during this time, like wool, this is like, the Tudor time. So this is when wool is building the Catholic Church. It's building the British Empire. It's building the Medici family.
Okay.
I know, kind of crazy. So Leonardo da Vinci came, the Medicis paid him and supported him, and they did it through wool. Aren't we cool that we like wool?
Yeah.
So the Spanish had this sheep that had really fine fleeces, the merino sheep. And the merino sheep have kind of like a box to their locks. So their locks really look like a box. And it was so prized because it's this really fine, delightful wool that it was illegal to import, export that sheep.
Oh, okay.
They wouldn't let it go anywhere else. If it wasn't Spanish merino, there wasn't a thing of it. And then Marie Antoinette married a Spanish man, and he gave her a sheep as a gift, and that is where we get Rambouillet. It is the French merino.
Okay.
But merinos are, we've bred them because we're humans, so we've tinkered with them. And there was a point in the merino history where we're like, we want them to have all these wrinkles so that they have all this wool on them.
Oh.
But then the wrinkles caused all sorts of issues. So now we're breeding the wrinkles out of the sheep, which is good. And then we brought, so the funny thing about Americans, this is totally American. So the colonists are here, and they get gifted a couple merino sheep. I can't remember who brought them over or why, but there were a couple prized merino sheep came over on a boat. Here they are in the States. And what do we do with them? We eat them. Promptly eat them because we're hungry. We're colonists. So that's kind of merino in a nutshell.
Okay.
It's the American breeds that we have really taken the best pieces of other breeds to make an American breed, and that is where you get your Targhis.
Okay.
So it's Targhis, Columbia, Polypay. Those are the big American breeds, all delightful, and you get to play with those and learn about them in my CSA because every month is a different type of sheep.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm signing up. I'm on it.
You're gonna be like,
yes.
Wow, Theresa, every month you know all this about every sheep breed, and I'll say, it's just up here.
Yes. No, you do for sure. I knew you. I mean, I knew you were knowledgeable, but I just think there's just so much to learn, right? Like there's so much to learn, and it's fascinating to me. Do you have help on the farm?
Nope. It's just me in the mill. Just me. And I do that on purpose because it is textile. It is dangerous, incredibly dangerous, and it's very specific work. So for me to get what I want out of my stuff, it is just me. So every time you pick up a skein of yarn, I have touched that. From every bit of the process, I went and picked up that wool. I skirted that wool. I washed it. I did everything. Even down to the label, because I love my husband, but he puts the labels on backwards. So then when I go to hang up the skein on, the labels down, and then it's like, oh, thanks. Yeah. Thanks, but no thanks. Yeah. And then when it comes to the shepherding, it's just me with that. Jake helps me out. But I've got a good system.
Do you have chores every day?
Every day.
Like, I mean, physically, can you put sheep out for a while and let them be for a little while? Or do they have to be fed and brought in and watered 4 times a day or anything like that? Like,
no. So we've got it down to an art form now. So they have big watering stations where they can access clean water. We just have to make sure that that's filled.
Yeah.
We feed them on giant round bales now.
Okay.
So they have a cage that shrinks up to that round bale.
Okay.
I just go in and check it to make sure, because sheep try to kill themselves all the time. So you have to make sure they're not trying to kill themselves. And now we're getting close to lambing, so I'm checking them a lot more often.
Yeah.
And
so you don't have to help during lambing either? Like,
hopefully not. No.
Okay.
Yeah. You always know you're gonna lose something.
Yeah.
Because that's nature. Yeah. So I know in this I'll have a couple ewes who miscarry before their lambs come to term for whatever reason. Most likely it's because that lamb wasn't viable.
Yeah.
And then I know during the birthing process I might lose a couple ewes. Yeah. Or I might lose a couple lambs. Yeah. And that's just it. Yeah. But hopefully I don't have to sit there and pull lambs out of sheep. I don't like doing that. No. I will, but I don't like doing that.
No, for sure. That's, I've seen some of that. And then how about the shearing part? Do you have people come to your farm for a day and shear? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so shearing, for us, we don't shear them ourselves because it's such specific work.
Yeah.
And it's highly skilled.
Yeah.
And the least stress we can put on the animal during the shearing process, the better.
Yeah.
So we have them sheared twice a year. We're coming close to shearing. I think I'm going to push it back to May this year. I was going to do it this month, but I'm going to wait because I don't trust this warm weather. I don't trust it. I think we're going to have another cold snap.
I think we're going to have another snowstorm probably, right? Because we haven't had it all winter, so none of us would be expecting it.
Right. And that would be the time that all the lambs are born and all the naked ewes would like have ketosis or milk fever.
My birthday's in April and it has been 80 degrees and we've had a blizzard in mid-April. So yeah. Yes. There's a reason we don't plant gardens in Minnesota till after Mother's Day.
Yeah. So we're going to wait until right after Mother's Day to shear the sheep this year.
And sheep have to be shorn.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
They do. Yeah. So the old breeds, like the Icelandics, the Soye, some Shetlands, most Shetlands, there are breeds that what we call, they will roo. In the industry call it rooing, R-O-O-I-N-G. And rooing is when they naturally break their wool. And back in the day, we would pull it off of them. We bred that out of sheep as we started to clip them, as we started to shear them because we wanted the wool. The wool was building the empire.
Yeah.
We want the wool.
Yeah.
And so my Icelandics will naturally roo still. So as a shepherd, I have to make sure that I shear them after the rise. That's another sheepy term.
Okay.
Again, subscribe to the newsletter because I will tell you these terms.
Yeah.
So the rise comes, and that's a hormone that is released in the ewe that tells her body to release that wool so that she can be free of it for the next year.
Okay.
And then grow the new wool. Otherwise, wool just grows exponentially.
Right. Yeah.
Like it does not stop.
Yep.
Yeah.
And can be very dangerous.
Oh, super dangerous.
Because there are environmentalists out there and animal lovers who think that it's a bad practice, right? And they're just not educated, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally not. Yeah. The sheep are not hurt during shearing. So sheep become incredibly docile when you put them on their butts.
Yep.
So if you flip a sheep onto its butt, it just sits there like, okay, let's do it. And then they get sheared. And as soon as they are done being sheared, they leave the barn and they're jumping and like super happy because now it's like getting a haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels amazing.
Yeah.
And they need it off. Yeah. It doesn't hurt them.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've seen shearing a number of times. It's fascinating how talented
they're so skilled.
Those people are.
Yeah.
And I would assume that during the certain times of the year, they're very scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to really have them on a schedule and because they'd be so busy, right? Shearing all the time.
Yeah. We booked we have good relationships with our shearers because we send them home with a lot of presents.
Oh, okay.
And then we allow a small group of people to attend shearing and we always eat together. And the shearers really like that we feed them and give them beer after they've done their work. Yeah. And then they can, go back home. Yeah. So we, good close relationship. But I usually have to schedule shearing 6 months in advance.
Yeah, I would think.
So I picked 2 days in the spring because I never know really when the rise is going to happen. And then we schedule our fall shearing. One of my shearer friends who I get a lot of my wool from because he's out there at the different farms and he'll call me and say, there's black Rambouillet fleeces here. They're going to burn them. Do you want them? And I'm like, yeah, I do. He goes to New Zealand and Australia and the UK to shear in the off season.
Oh gosh.
What a wonderful life, right?
Yeah.
Or out to California. He'll go to California to shear. He got me 2 bales of Rambouillet wool that they brought sheep in from California to graze under solar fields here in Minnesota.
Uh-huh.
And they just happened to shear them here. And since it was here,
I
could get the wool.
Oh, that's awesome. That's amazing. This has been an hour and some full of just inspirational, really knowledgeable. I'm so thankful. Honestly, I'm just so thankful that I know you, and I feel like I can move forward with, my knowledge and then sharing your products with people. I'm just super excited. I see Theresa at a lot of events. She goes to the farmers market up in the Twin Cities. Mm-hmm. You vend at almost all the events that are happening here. So like I said, doing the hustle. So if you are local, you can absolutely see her and run into her. But you can go online and purchase any of the things we talked about today. She has product out there, and I do hope that you will support her. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This was really fun.
This
really
was fun.
Great for a Friday afternoon. I love it.